The sun was just beginning to rise over New York City, casting golden rays across the towering skyscrapers. Inside one of those buildings, a sleek corporate office buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread like wildfire. Charles Whitmore, one of the richest men in America, was coming for a meeting. Known for his sharp suits, colder-than-ice personality, and an empire built on ruthless decisions, Charles wasn't someone you wanted to keep waiting. Employees scrambled to make sure everything was perfect. The boardroom gleamed under freshly polished lights. The chairs were arranged meticulously, and folders filled with presentations sat neatly on the table. Everyone knew this meeting could change the future of their company, a small but promising tech startup called Nexus Innovations. They had developed cutting-edge artificial intelligence that could revolutionize industries from healthcare to education. But they needed funding to scale it up, and Charles Whitmore was the man who could provide it. At exactly 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and Charles stepped out, flanked by his entourage of lawyers, advisors, and assistants. He walked briskly, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. His presence commanded attention without him saying a single word. People stopped what they were doing to watch him pass. Some whispered nervously. Others stood frozen, unsure if they should approach or stay back. As he entered the boardroom, Charles barely glanced at the staff members who greeted him. Instead, he focused solely on scanning the room, his eyes narrowing slightly as if searching for imperfections. One of the employees, a tall black man who worked as the lead developer at Nexus, stepped forward with a warm smile. He extended his hand, ready to introduce himself properly, but Charles didn't take the offered hand. Instead, he looked past the man, his lips curling into a faint sneer. "I don't shake hands with staff," he said flatly, his voice dripping with disdain. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. The room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. The developer stood there, his arms still outstretched, his face unreadable. It took every ounce of self-control not to react. Finally, he lowered his hand slowly, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. His colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension crackling between them. Charles, oblivious to or perhaps indifferent about the discomfort he'd caused, turned his attention to the documents laid out on the table. He flipped through them casually, making quiet comments to his team. To him, this wasn't personal, it was business. And in his world, business came first. People? They were replaceable. Unbeknownst to Charles, however, the man whose hand he'd rejected wasn't just another employee. He was the heart and soul of Nexus Innovations. Without him, the company wouldn't exist. Years of late nights, endless coding sessions, and tireless dedication had brought the startup to where it was today. This wasn't just a job for him, it was his life's work. As the meeting prepared to begin, the developer took a deep breath, pushing aside the sting of rejection. He reminded himself why he was here, not for validation from someone like Charles, but to fight for the vision he believed in. Still, the billionaire's dismissive attitude lingered in the air, setting the stage for a showdown neither of them expected. The meeting began with a flurry of activity. The team from Nexus Innovations stood confidently at the front of the room, ready to present their groundbreaking technology. Projectors hummed to life, screens lit up, and charts appeared on the walls. Everyone in the room could feel the energy radiating off the developers as they prepared to showcase years of hard work. The lead developer took center stage. He was calm but passionate, his voice steady as he explained how their AI platform worked. It wasn't just another piece of software, it was a tool designed to solve real-world problems. From diagnosing diseases faster in hospitals to helping farmers predict crop yields, the possibilities seemed endless. As he spoke, his eyes sparkled with excitement and his gestures grew more animated. You could tell this wasn't just a project for him. It was something he truly believed in. But Charles Whitmore sat unmoved. His face remained blank, his expression unreadable. While others leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by the presentation, Charles leaned back, arms crossed, studying the slides like they were nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. For him, it wasn't about changing lives or solving global challenges. It was about one thing: money. When the presentation ended, there was a brief pause before someone asked Charles what he thought. Without missing a beat, he launched into a critique that felt less like feedback and more like an interrogation. "What's your profit margin?" he demanded. "How many units can you sell in the first year? Where's the exit strategy?" The questions came rapid fire, each one sharper than the last. The team tried to answer as best they could, but it quickly became clear that Charles wasn't interested in the bigger picture. To him, this was all about maximizing returns for investors. Anything else, like improving people's lives or creating jobs, was secondary. Things took a turn when the conversation shifted to employee benefits. Someone from the Nexus team mentioned the importance of fair wages and health insurance for their workers. They talked about wanting to create a workplace where everyone felt valued and supported. It was part of their mission, a core value that guided everything they did. Charles scoffed openly. "Business isn't charity," he said bluntly, shaking his head. "If you spend too much time worrying about making employees happy, you'll never make shareholders rich." His words landed like a punch to the gut. The room went silent again, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The lead developer clenched his fists under the table, forcing himself to stay composed. He knew better than to argue directly with someone like Charles, but the comment stung deeply. It wasn't long before Charles zeroed in on another issue: the fact that the lead developer was even presenting in the first place. "Shouldn't your CEO be handling this?" he asked, pointedly raising an eyebrow. "Why is someone who works in development leading such a critical discussion?" The question hung in the air, dripping with condescension. But instead of backing down, the developer met Charles's gaze head-on. His voice was calm but firm as he responded, "Because I built this company alongside my team. Every single line of code reflects my vision and values. This isn't just a product, it's a reflection of who we are. And I won't compromise on that." For a split second, Charles looked surprised. Maybe it was the confidence in the developer's tone, or the unwavering conviction behind his words. Whatever it was, it caught him off guard. But he quickly masked his reaction, brushing it off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Vision doesn't pay bills," Charles muttered under his breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. The comment struck a nerve. Some members of the Nexus team exchanged glances, their frustration evident. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to respond. The developer, however, didn't flinch. He simply nodded slowly, letting Charles's words sink in. "You're right," he said finally, his voice steady. "Vision alone won't get us far, but neither will greed. If we lose sight of why we started this company, if we stop caring about the impact we can have, then none of this matters." Charles stared at him for a moment longer, then turned away, clearly unimpressed. To him, the developer's response sounded naive, idealistic even. In Charles's world, success was measured in dollars and cents, not dreams and aspirations. As the meeting dragged on, it became increasingly clear that these two men were speaking completely different languages. One saw business as a means to improve lives. The other saw it as a game to win at any cost. The gap between them felt insurmountable. By the time the meeting wrapped up, both sides knew the partnership was unlikely to happen. Charles left the room without so much as a goodbye, already dialing a call on his phone as he walked out. The developer watched him go, his mind racing with thoughts about what had just happened. Little did anyone realize, though, that the real drama was only beginning. What unfolded next would shock everyone, including the man who had refused to shake hands earlier that day. The meeting ended with a heavy silence. As Charles Whitmore and his team exited the room, their footsteps echoed down the hallway, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unease. For the Nexus team, it was hard to shake off the feeling of being dismissed, not just as professionals, but as people. The lead developer stood in the boardroom for a moment longer, staring at the empty chair where Charles had sat. His mind replayed the billionaire's cold words over and over again. Finally, he sighed deeply and turned to leave. But before he could step out of the room, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out absent-mindedly, expecting another mundane email or notification. What he saw instead made his heart skip a beat. A message from his financial advisor flashed across the screen. "We need to talk urgently." Confused, he called back immediately. On the other end of the line, his advisor sounded both excited and flustered. "You won't believe this," the advisor said breathlessly. "Something massive just happened. A group of major investors, some of the biggest backers we've been negotiating with, they've redirected their funding. All of it, straight into your personal account." The developer froze. "What do you mean, all of it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of it," the advisor repeated firmly. $2 billion. They pulled out of the deal with Charles Whitmore and decided to back you directly. For a moment, the developer couldn't process what he was hearing. $2 billion? That number felt surreal, almost impossible to comprehend. He sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. "Why would they do that?" he asked, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. His advisor explained that several key investors had grown uncomfortable during the meeting with Charles. They'd seen how dismissive and disrespectful he'd been, not just toward the developer but toward the entire team. To them, it was a red flag. If Charles couldn't even show basic respect, how could he be trusted to honor the values and mission of a company like Nexus Innovations? "They believe in you," the advisor continued. "They see how much this company means to you, and they trust your vision. They think you're the right person to take Nexus to the next level without compromising its soul." The developer sat there, stunned. This kind of support wasn't just about money. It was validation. It was proof that others believed in the same principles he'd fought so hard to uphold. Still, the weight of responsibility loomed large. $2 billion wasn't just a gift, it was a test. Could he handle this kind of pressure? Did he have what it took to turn this opportunity into something meaningful? As news of the investment spread through the office, the mood shifted dramatically. Employees who had been deflated after the tense meeting suddenly found themselves energized. Whispers of excitement rippled through the hallways. "Did you hear? We got the funding?" one person exclaimed. Another added, "And it's all because of him." But the developer didn't let the praise go to his head. Instead, he gathered the team together for an impromptu meeting. "Listen," he began, his tone serious but warm. "This changes things, but it doesn't change who we are. Our mission stays the same: to create technology that helps people, not just profits. We're going to use this money to grow, yes, but we're also going to stay true to our values. No shortcuts, no compromises." His words resonated deeply with the team. Many nodded in agreement, their eyes shining with renewed determination. This wasn't just a win for the company, it was a victory for everyone who had poured their hearts into making Nexus Innovations a reality. Meanwhile, outside the office, word of Charles's failed negotiation began to spread. Industry insiders buzzed with gossip, speculating about what had gone wrong. Some praised the investor's decision to side with the developer, calling it a bold move. Others criticized Charles, accusing him of letting arrogance cloud his judgment. Back at his own headquarters, Charles started to feel the ripple effects of his actions. His employees, who had always admired his success, began questioning his methods. One young intern even dared to ask during a Q&A session, "Do you think maybe you were too harsh? People are saying you lost the deal because of how you treated the team." Charles bristled at the question but didn't respond directly. Instead, he brushed it off, telling himself it didn't matter. Deals came and went, and there would always be other opportunities. But deep down, doubt crept in. Had he misjudged the situation? Was his approach really outdated? Over the next few days, Charles found himself replaying the meeting in his mind. He thought about the developer, the quiet strength in his voice, the unwavering belief in his work. Charles had dismissed him as naive, but now he wondered if there was more to it. Maybe the developer wasn't naive at all. Maybe he was onto something. As the dust settled, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about two men clashing over business philosophies. It was about values, integrity, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. And while Charles struggled to make sense of what had happened, the developer focused on moving forward with gratitude, humility, and a renewed commitment to proving that success didn't have to come at the expense of humanity. Weeks passed, and the fallout from the failed meeting continued to ripple through both companies. For Nexus Innovations, life had changed dramatically. With $2 billion in backing, they were no longer just a scrappy startup fighting for survival. They were now a force to be reckoned with. The team worked tirelessly, expanding their operations, hiring new talent, and rolling out pilot programs that showcased the potential of their AI technology. Their mission remained unchanged: to use innovation as a tool for good, helping communities, and solving real-world problems. But despite the whirlwind of success, the lead developer couldn't shake off the memory of Charles Whitmore. The billionaire's dismissive attitude during the meeting still lingered in his mind, not because it angered him, but because he felt sorry for the man. He knew all too well how easy it was to lose sight of what truly mattered when you became consumed by power or wealth. And while he didn't harbor any resentment toward Charles, he couldn't help but wonder if the billionaire would ever reflect on his actions on the other side of town. Charles found himself facing an unexpected challenge: his own reputation. News of the investors pulling out of the deal had spread like wildfire, and not everyone was kind about it. Some called him arrogant. Others accused him of being out of touch with modern values. Even within his own company, whispers began to circulate. Employees who once idolized him now questioned whether his leadership style was sustainable in today's world. One afternoon, as Charles sat alone in his office staring at reports and financial projections, he realized something unsettling. He missed the respect people used to give him without question. It wasn't the money or the deals he missed. It was the admiration. For years, he'd prided himself on being untouchable, someone who didn't need approval from anyone. But now, for the first time, he felt vulnerable. That vulnerability gnawed at him. He tried to ignore it, burying himself in work and meetings. Yet, no matter how busy he stayed, the image of the developer kept coming back to him. There was something about the way the man carried himself: calm, composed, unshaken even after being treated poorly, that stuck in Charles's mind. Finally, one evening, Charles decided to take a step he never thought he'd consider. He reached out to the developer. It wasn't easy for him. Charles wasn't used to apologizing or admitting fault. In fact, he hated the idea of appearing weak. But something inside him whispered that this might be worth it. The developer was surprised when he received the email. It was brief and formal, inviting him to lunch the following week. At first, he hesitated. Why should he agree to meet the man who had insulted him and his team? What could possibly come from such a meeting? But then he remembered something his grandmother used to say: sometimes grace is the strongest move you can make. So, against his better judgment, he accepted the invitation. When the day came, the two men met at a quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of the city. The atmosphere was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the tension of their last encounter. Charles arrived first, looking unusually nervous. When the developer walked in, Charles stood up awkwardly, unsure of how to greet him. "Thank you for coming," Charles said, his voice stiff but sincere. "No problem," the developer replied, taking a seat. His tone was polite but guarded. For a few moments, neither man spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Charles cleared his throat and broke the ice. "I wanted to apologize," he began, stumbling over the unfamiliar phrase. "What I said during our meeting, it wasn't right. I underestimated you and your team, and I see now that I made a mistake." The developer raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. This wasn't the cold, calculating Charles he remembered. This version seemed human. "It's okay," he said simply, leaning back in his chair. "We all have moments where we misstep. The important thing is learning from them." Charles nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he admitted, "about how I handled things. You're doing incredible work that matters, and I let my pride get in the way of seeing that." There was a pause before he added, I envy you, actually. Not the money or the success, but the way you carry yourself. Your conviction, that's something I've lost along the way. The developer studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. It's not too late to find it again, he said. Success isn't measured by how much money you make or how many deals you close. It's about the impact you leave behind. If you want to change, start small. Show your team you care, listen to them, respect them. Those little things add up. Charles listened intently, nodding as if committing every word to memory. He hadn't expected this conversation to feel so hopeful. As the meal went on, the two men talked more openly. They shared stories about their journeys, the challenges they'd faced, the sacrifices they'd made, and the lessons they'd learned along the way. By the end of the lunch, Charles felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For the developer, the meeting reinforced a belief he'd always held dear: everyone deserves a second chance. Even someone like Charles, whose flaws were glaring, was capable of growth. When they parted ways, Charles shook the developer's hand, not reluctantly this time, but firmly and with genuine respect. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Years rolled by, and the events of that fateful meeting faded into memory, but their impact lingered. For Nexus Innovations, life had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. With the backing of $2 billion, the company grew exponentially, expanding its reach far beyond what anyone thought possible. Their AI technology became a cornerstone for industries worldwide, solving problems that once seemed insurmountable. From improving access to healthcare in underserved communities to helping small farmers predict weather patterns and increase crop yields, Nexus proved time and again that innovation could be both profitable and compassionate. The lead developer remained at the heart of it all, guiding the company with the same principles he'd always stood for: integrity, humility, and a relentless focus on making a difference. He never let success change who he was or why he started this journey in the first place. Instead, he used his platform to inspire others, often speaking at conferences about the importance of staying true to your values even when faced with adversity. Success isn't just about numbers, he would say during these talks. It's about how you treat people along the way. Every decision we make leaves a mark, not just on our careers, but on the world around us. His words resonated deeply, especially among younger generations eager to build businesses that prioritized purpose over profit. Slowly but surely, Nexus became more than just a tech company. It became a symbol of hope, proving that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. Meanwhile, Charles Whitmore embarked on a quieter but equally profound transformation. The lunch meeting with the developer had planted a seed in his mind, a seed of reflection and self-awareness. At first, the changes were subtle. He started listening more during meetings, asking questions instead of barking orders. He made an effort to remember employees' names and acknowledge their contributions. Small gestures, yes, but they didn't go unnoticed. Over time, Charles began implementing bigger shifts within his own empire. He launched initiatives aimed at supporting underprivileged communities, partnering with nonprofits to provide job training and educational resources. He also restructured parts of his company to prioritize employee well-being, introducing flexible work policies and mental health programs. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, but Charles was determined to prove that he could evolve. Not everyone believed in his newfound commitment to change. Critics argued that his actions were too little, too late, accusing him of trying to polish a tarnished reputation rather than genuinely caring. But Charles didn't let the skepticism deter him. He knew he couldn't undo decades of behavior overnight, but he was willing to put in the work. One day, years after their initial meeting, Charles crossed paths with the developer again at a charity gala hosted by one of the largest tech organizations in the world. The event brought together leaders from across industries, all united by a shared goal of using technology for social good. When Charles spotted the developer across the crowded room, he hesitated for a moment before walking over. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you here," he said, offering a warm smile. The developer grinned back. "How could I miss it? This is exactly the kind of thing we've been working toward. They spent the next hour catching up, sharing updates about their respective journeys. Charles spoke openly about the challenges he'd faced while trying to reshape his company's culture. "There are days when I wonder if I'm doing enough," he admitted. "But then I remind myself that progress takes time." "You taught me that," the developer nodded thoughtfully. "You're doing great," he replied sincerely. "And honestly, the fact that you're even trying says a lot. Most people wouldn't bother." As the night wore on, the two men found themselves standing side by side on the balcony, looking out over the glittering city skyline. Neither said anything for a while, content to simply enjoy the view. Finally, Charles broke the silence. "You." "No," he said softly. "People still talk about that meeting. About how losing $2 billion taught me a lesson money can't buy." The developer chuckled. "Well, maybe there's a reason that story keeps getting told? Maybe it's not just about you, it's about reminding everyone that respect and integrity matter." "That's something worth remembering," Charles smiled, nodding slowly. "You're right. And for what it's worth, thank you for everything." The developer glanced at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "No thanks needed," he said after a pause. "We're all just trying to do better, aren't we?" A lasting impact in the years that followed. The legacies of these two men continued to shape the world in different but complementary ways. The developer remained steadfast in his mission, ensuring that Nexus Innovations stayed true to its roots even as it reached new heights. His story inspired countless entrepreneurs to chase dreams rooted in compassion and community. Charles, on the other hand, became a testament to the power of redemption. While he never fully shed his reputation as a tough businessman, he earned a new Title I of resilience and growth. By choosing to embrace humility and empathy, he showed that it's never too late to rewrite your story. Their paths rarely crossed again, but when they did, there was always a mutual understanding between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the roles they'd played in each other's lives. Without realizing it, they had become living examples of the lessons they'd learned, that success means nothing without humanity, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning but from growing. And so their tale lived on, not just as a cautionary story about arrogance and greed, but as a reminder that every action carries weight, every choice shapes the future, and every person has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends wealth.